Hello, I'm retired Battalion Chief Larry Cockman from the Greensboro, North Carolina Fire Department History Book Committee. We're here today at the Greensboro Historical Museum. I'm standing in front of the General Green, the first steam pumper, or as they called it back then, a steamer. Today, December 9th, 2019, we are starting a new tradition of recording and preserving the heritage and culture of our retirees. Our retirees have contributed so much to the success of our great fire department. Their stories retire with them and are sometimes gone forever when they pass away. They will share their emergency calls that will always be a part of their memories forever. So sit back and listen as they carry us through their journey in the Greensboro Fire Department.
Well, my name is Alan Nix. I go by Skip. I came on the fire department in 1980 and retired in 2015. Grew up in Greensboro, went to Peck Elementary, right behind Station 8 there in Glenwood. From there, went to Jackson Junior High School and graduated from Smith High School. And 3 weeks after graduating, I entered the Marine Corps for boot camp and served in the Marines from 75 to 79, and my MOS was Crash Fire Rescue. That's where I got my beginning in the fire service, was in the Marine Corps. Well, I had my brother Eddie Nix was a captain at Station 8, and he retired. I have a nephew still on the fire department, Dan Nix. I have my son, Alan Nix, on the department, and two son-in-laws, Alex Gunner and Trenton Pence. And I also have a nephew who's on the police department. And so the Nix family has over 100 years of service to the city of Greensboro. Well, I had just gotten out of the Marine Corps in '79, and when I came out of service, of course, I did want to become a Greensboro firefighter, and there was a class going on. So I had to wait 16 months before getting hired and starting training in October of '80. I helped build houses during that time. Well, my first connection with the fire service is I had an uncle who was Crash Fire Rescue in the Air Force. So that's the first time I even thought about the fire service. And then, of course, again, I had a brother who came on the department 9 years before me in '71. But believe it or not, the main driving force was when the program Emergency came out. Everybody remembers Johnny Gage and Roy DeSoto, but to see what they were doing and saving lives, it became reality, and I knew right then that that's what I wanted to do. My training officer was Larry Cockman. He was a captain at the time. I went through the little physical part they did, you know, they make sure you could follow instructions, and you had different size hose, and they asked you to pick up every other sections to make sure you was smart enough to figure that out. And then you went out to the training tower and you had to hang out the window with your weight to make sure you could hold your weight up and pull yourself back in. So things of that nature, a lot different than it is today. My first connection was going to Fire Station 8 when it was on West Lee Street, right up there at the Coliseum. That's where 8 was at before it moved down on Coliseum Boulevard. I knew I didn't come to the fire department to get rich. I came to the fire department to make a difference. And because you can't put a price on saving someone's life. And that's what meant the most to me about being on the fire department. My first captain was Lloyd Halsey, and Captain Woody Parrish was on Engine 1. My driver was Bob McLean, and Tim Cox and I were on the back of Engine 2. I just remembered at Station 1, you know, you're young, you come out, you don't know what to expect, but Captain Halsey and Captain Parrish just made life awesome at the fire station. I mean, I don't think anybody could have had two better officers to come out with. But we stayed active, we had fun, and we'd pull the trucks out sometimes out at night and play what we call the toilet bowl. It was the tag football, and we would play it right inside the bay. And the reason we call it the toilet bowl is we would take a roll of toilet tissue and use that as the football. And that's how we would play during that time. Well, you know, today in the fire stations, they're building the stations with individual rooms. And I don't think that's all that great myself, but because we lived in like a squad bay. And so you were all in there together at night, and you was always laughing and cutting up and doing things. You got to know each other. The thing that was remarkable is how you started out as friends, and then you became family. And you would laugh together, you would get frustrated with one another, and you just learned to work things out. We didn't take things, I mean, people say something to you. You know, I know today a lot of times people get really uptight and want to fire back and just cause a ruckus. Back then, if you got your feelings hurt, you just learned to deal with it, and it ended up making you a better person. Well, my first fire, I'll never forget, because it took me about 5 shifts before I got my first fire, and it was a box store near Station 4, back behind them. What they did is they recycled cardboard boxes. And they had them piled up and stacked up and bound out in the back, and it caught fire. And it wasn't that dangerous of a fire. It wasn't anything like that. It was just a lot of work, because you had to sit there and bust apart and clear them apart so you could get down to the seat of the fire to put it out. Every call's a big deal. The big call, the largest fire I ever went on, was the Davie Street fire, and I was driving engine 2 that night. There was plenty of fire for anybody who wanted to come get some. The big thing was, I remember we had been, Chief Shoemate was the battalion chief. He was the incident commander at the time. And he had already decided we were going to a defensive mode, and we were taking the ground ladder away from one of the windows. And that's when there was a backdraft, and it blew 7 of us across the street. And when I got up, all I could see was just smoke. You couldn't see nobody. It was a bright light, and of course that was from the street lights filtering through the smoke. But at that time, you're wondering, just where are you? Yeah, and then you start checking body parts. I'll never forget going down both legs, checking arms to make sure I was okay. When it cleared off a little bit, our driver, who was acting captain that night, he was on the back, Bob McLean, when it blew, the ladder had fell and hit him in the head and knocked him out. He was laying in the middle of Davie Street, unconscious. And we grabbed him and pulled him over to the other side to the fence. But by this time, the fire had already crossed over the street and was burning on the other side there at Greensboro Court. Greensboro Court was being remodeled at the time and was going to become like townhomes. And so it was all night long. The others were, we had a trench rescue at Wesley Long Hospital. A trench collapsed, buried 2 workers. We were able to, Danny Lynch and I were on the rest of Squad 1. We were able to get there and dig the one rescuer out and victim, pulled him out. And as soon as we pulled him out, we could see the head of the other guy. He was standing on him. So it took us probably 45 minutes to an hour to actually dig down deep enough to pull him out. Of course, at that time, he had already passed away, but when it was all said and done, we was about 25 feet down in that trench. And we always laughed. We received the Medal of Valor for that call. And today, if you'd do that, they would write you up because you didn't have the cribbing and everything you needed. So, and then the one that was made national news is we had a worker over on Seneca Drive fall into fell into a sawdust silo, and he had landed on an auger and punctured his lung and broke several ribs. And that's when we had established a high-level rescue team. And we had trained and trained and trained and never gotten a call. And that was our first big call. And our training really paid off. We went down, got him out, and had him to the hospital in 55 minutes. And we all know about the golden hour. You have that golden hour. And Dr. Mayer, who was head of trauma at Cone Hospital at the time, told us if we'd have been another 5 minutes, he would have bled to death internally. Oh, I think anytime you're responding to emergency situations, it's going to impact you either positive or negative. The one that hit me the worst was when I was on the rescue, I did CPR on a 2-month-old little girl, and she didn't make it. Well, I happened to go home to a 2-month-old baby girl, and I remember to this day standing over her crib and crying for 20 minutes. And then for weeks, we'd lay her down, and I'd go in there and check, make sure she was breathing, because that had an impact. And what a lot of people don't understand, firefighters, police officers, EMS, people that's out in the streets, they suffer from PTSD just like our military do. And a lot of firefighters, I know, they try to just laugh it off and they don't talk about it. They don't want to talk to anybody, but we're starting to see an increase in suicide among first responders. And they need to know there's no shame in going to talking to someone to get help, because it does exist. You know, a service member in the military, they may get in a firefight, and of course they may see some of their comrades get killed in action. And but after a period of time, they're back. You think about firefighters and police officers who serve 30 years, and they see something bad one shift, and they come back and see it all over again, over and over and over. So they need to really concentrate and understand that there's help. Don't let that affect you to the point that you do something tragic. Well, on 9/11, let me back up. I was the safety officer at the time. And I was assisting with the honor guard with the fire department. And we had gone out to Station 14 for honor guard practice. And one of the firefighters came out and said an airplane just hit the World Trade Center building. And so, of course, what's going through our mind is a small plane has hit the building. So we go in, of course, we're watching it, and we're seeing the smoke and everything coming out. And the thing that I noticed first was the size of the hole. And I thought this wasn't a small plane. But I made the comment as we were watching. I said, how would you like to be in the other tower looking over and seeing that one on fire? And I had just gotten that out of my mouth when the second plane hit the second tower. At that point, we knew that we were under a terrorist attack. And so we immediately canceled. We came back to Fire Station 1. We got a fire call from a Mrs. Smith. Her husband, Leon, was on ladder, I believe, ladder 110 up in New York. And he had called her and was telling her what was going on. And the beeper hit and they were dispatched. And she didn't know what else to do, but her husband had always told her to call the fire station if she needed anything. So she called and made a phone call to Chief Shoemate, who was the Deputy Chief of Operations at the time. And he wanted to know how we could help. And she had 2 daughters down at Johnson C. Smith University. And we sent 2 firefighters down there and picked them up and brought them back to Greensboro to be with their mother. And, of course, Leon was one of the 343 that perished that day. So just being there at that time to be able to surround her with firefighters and love and comfort, she knew where she could go. I do know that as I became the training officer, that many of the young men who started applying, 9/11 had a big impact on them. Most of them were high school students at the time, And all of a sudden, they knew exactly that because of what happened on 9/11, that they wanted to be firefighters. Well, no one forgets their training officers. You may forget a lot of things, but you don't forget who your training officers. So that was the first group of people who had a direct impact on me. And that was Captain Larry Cockman and Captain Randy Parrish. They impacted you. Then, of course, my brother, who was a firefighter at the time, I had looked up to him ever since I could walk. He was a superb athlete in high school and had a reputation of being a go-getter and getting in there and fighting fire. So watching that. Kerry Hensley, who I'd known my whole life, he was a firefighter. And when he became the training supervisor, I had a chance to watch him and look at him. And the way he handled people, I really admired the way he treated everybody the same. I don't care if you were a recruit or if you were the mayor of Greensboro. He didn't treat anybody any different. And I thought, I need to learn from that. I need to try to treat everybody the same because that had a major impact. Well, again, you're working for city government. And anytime you have government, whether it's city, county, state, federal, politics are involved. And I enjoyed being a chief officer. I retired as a division chief. But when you talk to firefighters, I don't care what rank, they'll always talk about when they were on the truck. You never hear about them talking about when they were in admin or when they were in the chief's car. They're always talking about when they were on the truck, because that's why you came to the fire department. You wanted to ride the truck, you wanted to save lives, you wanted to make a difference. And of course, again, the fire department has to have an administration. You have to be able to run the fire department. I mean, you have to have logistics, you have to have mechanics, you have to have this and that. You're dealing with the city. So the politics of things just always aggravated me. The different laws that came down through the federal government about hiring and you had to do this and do that. And so that kind of was the negative side. But the positive side was always the firefighters at the fire station. When you could go and just sit down and enjoy being with those guys, it was a big impact. If the fire department had not had an impact on me, I wouldn't be sitting here 4 years after retirement willing to take part in this. It's still a big part. Again, I still got 4 family members on the fire department. And my joy comes in the fact that they saw enough enjoyment of what I had in the fire department that they too. Now again, the ages of my son-in-laws and my son, 9/11 was the major impact. I know that. But going back and visiting the fire stations when they were young and seeing how the camaraderie took place and everything, that had an impact, and absolutely. I'm glad that I'm retired, but yeah, if I had to do it again, I would do it. I went to Station 10 the Sunday before I retired on Monday morning. I went to Station 10 and they let me ride the engine that day. So I was actually riding as a captain. And my son was driving and my 2 son-in-laws were on the back of the truck. And just couldn't wait for a call to come in. And we waited all day. We didn't even get a medical call for a stump toe. And I thought, wow, my last day on the job, and I'm not even going to get a call. And then my family had came over. We were going to have a hot dog dinner that night, and they was going to take me home on the fire truck. That's the way I wanted to leave. And then about I think it was around 3:45 the afternoon, the call came in the county, Pinecroft Sedgefield. And I didn't think anything about it because it wasn't us. And then we were standing around talking, and my son walked out front, and he looked, and you could see the smoke in the air. And he said, man, I said, well, is that where the county went? He said, I don't know. So they went back to check with Chief Brown, because I wasn't going to even though I was a division chief, I wasn't going to override the battalion chief. That was his job that day, to see if we could just go check it out. And as we were walking back there, we got dispatched on a second alarm. So my very last call after 39 years in the fire service, my son got to drive me to the call, and then we all got out and got to fight fire with my son, my two son-in-laws, and Captain Tommy Brown on Ladder 10. And what a moment. I mean, to sit there and think, it was almost like God was saying, well done, thou good and faithful servant. We did get back to the station, and the beeper went off for a med call. And Curtis Brown, the battalion chief, said, stop, you're not going anywhere. Said that call was going to be your last call. So he held us and sent somebody else. So of anything that happened to me, it happened on the very last day. Well, what was cool too, just to end on that one, is I live right down the street from Station 52, and as we came by the station, the trucks were gone. And I didn't think anything about it, and I live in a cul-de-sac, and when I got home, they were in the cul-de-sac waiting on me. With all my neighbors. Chief Hensley's my next door neighbor, and he had told all the neighbors what was going on. So all the neighbors and Station 52 was waiting on me when we pulled up. That was pretty cool. Well, I think when you do go into public service, if it's truly what you want to do, to me it's a calling. No different than a preacher feeling a call from God to become a preacher. I felt like I had a call from God to be a firefighter. I just knew it. I don't think you find out in the 10th grade that you want to do something and you do it. My father-in-law, the first time I ever met him, I was 16 years old. He said, what do you want to do in your life? I said, I want to be a Marine and I want to be a Greensboro firefighter. And he said later on in life he'd never met a 16-year-old that knew what he wanted to do, and by the time he was 23 had done it. So that was just awesome to think that God allowed me to do exactly what I wanted to do. Well, as I've told many people, being a firefighter to me is the greatest thing in the world, because once everybody gets suited up, you all look the same. And when you're in the building and you can't see your hand in front of your face, you don't care what gender, you don't care what color, you don't care what religion. You've got your friend in there. And you've got somebody sticking right beside of you. Why did 343 firefighters die on 9/11? Just because they wasn't going to let their friends down. They were going to be right there with them through thick and thin. And that's what I loved about the fire service. Right at the very end of my career, we had the fire on South Elm, Eugene, where Captain Sterling was trapped underneath the building. And I was standing, I could see him. I just didn't have an air pack on to go in and help. There was a hose nearby. I did pick up the hose, and because there was a lot of chaos. There was firefighters coming out of the building, and he was still trapped underneath there. So I just picked up the hose and helped keep the fire off of him. Truck 5 come over, and Kevin Rice assisted and took the nozzle at one point, and then worked to get him out. And to be honest, it was very scary when we did get him out, because he looked like that he'd already passed away. Well, again, all your training sometimes kind of goes out the window, because all the firefighters, the one mission they had was to get him out. And we didn't use conventional measures to get him out. But they got him on a stretcher, and it was get him to the EMS unit as fast as possible. And there was no hesitation on EMS. As soon as he was loaded off to the hospital, he went. We found out later that he did get his breathing back at Cone, and then they transferred him over to Baptist. Well, I've been very fortunate. About 4 years before I retired, I found out I was a type 2 diabetic. And so fortunately that's been controlled. Everything's good, no issues with lungs or heart or anything of that nature. Now that doesn't mean something can't happen you walk out the door, you know. But no, I've been very fortunate that I haven't suffered any health issues. But there's 3 things that the Marine Corps taught me. And the first one was lead by example. There's no other way to lead than example. The second one is take care of those under your charge. Take care of your people. Sometimes that means you got to give them a little kick in the rear end, but that's out of love. It's out of concern because you want to see that person excel. And the last one is develop your people. Train them to be able to take your place. The military's done that for over 200 years. Someone gets killed in combat, then the next person needs to be able to step up to the plate and take over. And that's the way you need to be thinking about it. If you become a driver, then teach those people on the back of the truck how to drive that truck, everything you know about that truck. You become a lieutenant or a captain, you start showing people how you lead those people that's assigned to you. And it goes further than just riding the truck. These peoples have families, and what goes on at those homes affect the way people are at the station. If they come in and they're not acting the right way, then ask them, I'm not here to get in your personal life, man, but you don't seem like yourself today. And as long as they know you care, it goes a long way. And that goes all the way up the ladder. Take care of the people that the good Lord put under you. And things will make a big difference in years to come.
We hope you enjoyed watching these documentaries. It was our goal to share and preserve the memories of our retired Greensboro firefighters. It is our desire that these documentaries will inspire future generations to continue the brotherhood, sisterhood, and camaraderie while always striving for excellence in their careers. While fire apparatus, equipment, and technology have improved, several things will always remain the same. The courage and bravery it takes to mitigate natural and man-made disasters will always be a part of the job. Although our retirees are no longer a physical part of the GFD world, a giant piece of each retiree's memories have been shared with you today. These memories will be in their hearts and minds forever. A special thank you goes out to Captain Harold Haney for his many long hours of recording and editing. Thank you, Harold. A job well done.